Welcome to the Daily Flow. Please welcome your host, John Coleman.
Hello, everyone. Here we're talking about your capacity is your throughput. This will be a daily show, 5 p.m. UK, Monday to Friday. Let's see how it goes. Kanban, Scrum, Nexus, LESS, LineaX. Questions in relation to your scenarios can be dealt with here as well. So today, though, we're going to talk about your capacity is your throughput. So often what I hear people saying is, well, we've got capacity. We can take on this work. And I often wonder when people say that, because really it feels a bit subjective to me. How do you know actually that you've got capacity? How does your team know that it's got capacity to take on extra work? It's a feeling that people have. Whether it's true or not, that's what we're going to delve into today. So how do we figure out what our capacity is? I want to show you something. Today we're kind of going to have a bit of a Kanban theme and just show you a simple little diagram, simple little Kanban board, if you like. There's one or two things missing. It's not quite a Kanban board yet. You've got a backlog there, a list of all the things that need to be done, and there's different work item types coming through here. You don't have to use work item types. I find, though, that teams who work in non-software find them quite useful. Backlog is kind of like the list of things that we need to get done, and there's some kind of policy here where they have a kind of a start or replenishment policy, some criteria to decide, when is the right time and maybe what items you might bring in if you decide to bring items into your first in progress column. In this case, there are 3 in progress columns: in progress 1, in progress 2, in progress 3. You can see there's some kind of WIP limits there, work in progress limits, 4 for in progress 1, 3 for in progress 2, 2 for in progress 3. Just because you have a limit doesn't mean that you have to have fill the board up to that limit. So I'm actually comfortable enough. I'm not too worried about in progress 1 being under its limit. The limit is a limit. It's the maximum. It's the ceiling. There's one item on this board as well that's blocked. It's got a little X on it, and there's a done column here at the end as well. And what we like to do in Kanban is we like to measure a few things. And one of the things we like to measure is how long do things take. So you could say, for example, from here to here is a cycle time for in progress 2. But you might be more interested in maybe from this point here, from the time it came out of the backlog into in progress 1, and it moved right across into done from in progress 3. And how long that takes in Kanban Guide, we call that cycle time. You can have a number of different cycle times. Flow time would be another expression that people use as well. Don't really mind what expression people use, but as long as you're clear in the team, how long does it take? What's the started point and what's the finished point, which is the border between those columns there. The next measure that we look at is how many items do we have in progress. So we count the number of items that are in progress, the number of progress items at the time, the number of items between the started point and the finished point. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 items in progress at the moment. So the work in progress in this case is 8. And then another measure we have is throughput. How many items per time period are going over that finished point boundary per day, per week, per sprint, if you're using sprints, for example. So how long is that actually taking? And we refer to that as throughput. It's a rate. So how many items are we delivering per day, per week? Let's say per week. And what bothers me sometimes is we have teams who they're delivering, say, 2 items per week, but they're bringing in maybe 6 items per week. And you don't need to be a genius to figure out that in that case, if you keep that up, you're bringing in 3 times as much work as is going out. And I often ask teams to think about this, that when you say you've got capacity, what do you mean by that? Because for me, the capacity is your throughput. If you can deliver, your team can deliver 2 items per week, then maybe you should be thinking out about bringing in 2 items per week. In this particular case, we do have a basket of different types of work, and there's a bit of a mix in there. And all people often say to me, well, some items are not as equal as others and all this kind of thing. And so therefore, you can't really just use throughput. You need to be also thinking about how big each of these items are. And there's a couple of factors that I'd like you to bear in mind. One of the factors that I'd like you to bear in mind is that often when we're doing work, I think most of the teams that I work with have some kind of dependency on other teams. Another team needs to do item X before we can finish item Y, something like that. And in those situations, how long it takes for a work item to get from the started point to the finished point has almost nothing to do with estimated effort. Because one of the considerations a lot of teams don't bear in mind is waiting time. How long are we going to be waiting for somebody else, or could even be waiting on ourselves? And we often even overestimate our ability to get stuff done as well. I know when I do gardening, for example, at the weekend, I overestimate my ability to how many things I can plant and so on, and how many jobs I can get done, and painting the fence and so on and so forth. And knowledge work is no different in a sense, although it's even more difficult, I would say, to figure out. Really, we don't really know how big each of these items are until they're actually done. We can kind of guess how big they are, but we really don't know how big these items are. There is one kind of caveat, I guess. If one of these items was, basically the size of an elephant, if this item here, for example, was much, much bigger, and we knew it was really obvious that it was much bigger, maybe there's an option to get this item right-sized. Maybe you need to break it down and, see what item you can bring in. But other than that, as long as the items are not what I call elephant size, really, as long as it fits within your expectation about how long work takes, then you should be comfortable with that. So in this particular case, on this board, they have a thing called a service level expectation, SLE. It's an expectation, not an agreement, not a guarantee. And so what they'd be saying here is that 85% of the time, we could deliver something in 10 days or less. 10 days or less. So if we think we can get the item done in less than 10 days, that's great. But when you're looking at your items coming in, how do you know that they're right size? Well, you just kind of ask yourselves as a team, well, does this item feel like it fits within our normal SLE of 10 days or less? And then whether it's a kind of a small, medium, large, it kind of doesn't matter so much as long as it fits within your SLE. So there is one other consideration as well. It's not just about, we talked about waiting time. How long are we actually waiting on somebody else? We also we're also not so good at estimating, and people often try to get better at estimating and so on, but we're really not so good at that. It does give us a level of comfort. I'm not saying don't do that. If it's working for you, keep doing it, but it's the word of caution would be that really it's just something to help you to get comfortable with the work. It doesn't really tell you how long the work is going to take. So we kind of suck at estimating. We don't really consider waiting time so much when we're estimating effort. Most people don't anyway. I've had a handful of people who did think about waiting time. And there's one other consideration from J.B. Rensberger. He talked about a thing called accidental complication. And what he meant by that was that when you pick up an item and you think, okay, boss, it feels like, this item here feels like I can get this done in 2 weeks. When you actually pick it up, you might realize it takes 3 months, because some of our work has an element of the unknown. A lot of our work actually has an element of the unknown. So kind of 3 reasons really why estimation won't necessarily get you the best results. So my preference, it's not perfect, because this throughput, some weeks there'll be some kind of hairy items coming through and some, a bit more straightforward. But hopefully we'll see a range over the weeks. Some weeks we'll deliver 3, other weeks we'll deliver 4, some weeks we'll only deliver 1. But we'll see a kind of a sample, and we can use that as a kind of a gauge, if you like, about how much work do we think we can get done. And so when people say, well, we think we can bring in 6 items. And I say, well, are you sure about that? Because your throughput is only 2 at the moment. There's one other measure that's really crucial as well. It's work item aging. It's how long are these items in the system? So this item here, for example, might be 15 days old. This one here, maybe for some reason it jumped through, and this one's only 1 day old. This one's, say 2 days old, and so on. And so when you let items age, your cycle time, how long it takes to get from the starting point to the finish time point, could become more unpredictable. I'm not saying that your work is predictable, but it would become more unpredictable. And when your cycle time becomes more unpredictable, you're likely to get more kind of erratic cycle times, kind of. If you had a cycle time scatter plot over time, you'd have your cycle times kind of getting longer and longer, so to speak. And you don't need to be a genius to figure out that if your cycle times keep getting longer, then eventually, how much stuff you're delivering will eventually start coming down. And that's something we really need to be careful about. So there's a double whammy here, because number one, a team saying they can bring in 6 items when they've got a throughput of 2, might not be taking into account that there's already some work in the system that's actually getting quite old. And by bringing in those 6 items, not only are we already challenged, but we might even be putting at risk the work that's already in the system. And so my preference, when teams, Scrum teams, for example, are doing refinement or backlog refinement, and when Kanban teams are doing maybe right sizing, and they're doing a little bit of look ahead about what's going on, and they're trying to set expectations, my preference in the very short term would be throughput. But beyond the current week, really, or if you're using sprints, maybe on the current sprint, even with the current sprint, I would prefer you to use a thing called Monte Carlo probabilistic forecasting, which we'll cover on another session. Not everyone's a fan of that, but what I like about it is it takes the samples of your throughput, and it looks at how many items might be coming in your backlog, and based on how much stuff you got going through the system and how long things are taking, it runs some samples, and you can get in a similar way where you might be able to say from the data that 85% of the time, if one item starts, it'll be done in 10 days or less. Using Monte Carlo, you might be able to figure out that, we can deliver 20 items in 40 days or less, something like that. So Monte Carlo would be my preference in terms of forecasting. But today, the topic I wanted to address was capacity. What is our capacity? How much new work can we really absorb from our backlog here, in this case, into the in progress 1 column that still needs to go to in progress 2, in progress 3? I would say throughput is your friend, and I'd like you to take a look at that.
got a question for us? Leave a voice message at anchor.fm/dailyflow/message and we'll feature it as well as provide you with an answer.